Hello, this is Phoenix Noir with Beats of History. This is a brand spanking new channel on YouTube, and I will also have my links to my other social media as well. But this channel, it was really inspired by Bailey Sarion, Brittany Vaughn, Better Off Red, and many others who escape my mind right now, who basically do get ready with me videos or makeup storytelling, not made up storytelling, but makeup and storytelling type videos. But I wanted to bring, I didn't want to tell the same type of stories necessarily they were telling. When I was growing up, the only story that you heard about from Black history were the slavery and the civil rights movement. And those might have been like maybe 10 pages out of a whole entire history book. Knowing full well or finding out that later on in life that we were so much more involved, we as a people, as Black people, were so much more involved in the history than that. I love makeup. For a period of time, I was a freelance makeup artist. Here and there, it's kind of more of a side gig for me. But I've always had the passion for makeup, for beauty, for fashion, all that stuff, especially makeup. So I'm like, you know what? This would be a great way for me to marry both worlds together, doing makeup and also sharing stories of Black history, but putting my own little spin on it too, of course. But trying to get the research, and everything. One problem that you will notice with this video, I'm just going to put it out there, is I thought I had enough story to carry me through the whole start to finish of the makeup look, but I didn't. So what I am doing to make up for that, I am actually adding some of the interviews that I used for research. I got to then what I, the information I gathered. Like, oh shoot, I barely even put on my foundation yet. The get ready that I'm doing tonight, and this was one that I thought at first I was going to be the first person to come out with it. But then when I looked it up on YouTube, Bailey Sarion beat me to the punch. She's already done this story actually. But yeah, this is about Black Wall Street, also known as the Tulsa Race Massacre, also known as the Tulsa Race Riot. We are going to unpack the story of the Tulsa Race Massacre. What started this whole thing was something that went down on the elevator. If there was ever a time that I wish that we had the technology now back then, it was then. Because anytime something dramatic or crazy goes on an elevator now, especially when it's someone that's high profile, as you all know, it goes viral. You know what happened. It's basically open to interpretation. But unfortunately, in this case, we really don't know what happened on that elevator. What we are sure that didn't happen was that there was no case of sexual assault that actually took place. But let's unpack this and discuss what happened, the catalyst of this event, the true catalyst of this event actually, and what happened, all the things that happened from there. Because there are so many things. I think a lot of what you hear about the Tulsa Race Massacre only scratches the surface. There's so many things that happened and that I can't even squeeze into this video. But we're going to try the best we can to really do it justice and just break it down. Dick Rowland worked shining shoes in the downtown Tulsa area. The residents of Greenwood recall him being a pleasant young man that attended Booker T. Washington High School. Sarah Page was new to Tulsa from Kansas City. She was working as an elevator operator at the Drexel Building. The Drexel Building is the only building in downtown Tulsa that has a restroom that Black people could use. The restroom was on the 3rd floor. It is highly likely that Dick Rowland and Sarah Page had seen each other before on numerous occasions before the incident. It is believed that Dick Rowland tripped and accidentally stepped on Page's foot. It is also rumored that the two may have been romantically involved. Whatever the case, there's very little background story on Dick Rowland and Sarah Page. It's really sketchy. There's rumors that they were, again, like I said, there was rumors that they were romantically involved. And maybe when she screamed out, and they may have been in the middle of something, or could have been just very innocent that, they seen each other before, but it was an old rickety elevator. It may have been shaky, and as he was getting on the elevator, and then he tripped and maybe somehow tripped forward or something along that lines. Whatever really happened, we'll never know. But what we know that more than likely didn't happen, it definitely wasn't a case of sexual assault. Regardless of what happened, a nearby clerk at the Renberg department store heard Sarah Page scream. He immediately went to the scene to find out what happened and obviously drew his own conclusion about what did happen. When this happened, Dick Rowland, he was startled because he realized the optics of how it looked. Because back then, if you just, black men have been killed for less. So he realized the optics of the situation, how it looked, even though he knew that, hey, I just stumbled upon this lady, whatever the case may be. The white store clerk, he already had some preconceived notions in his own head, jumped to his own conclusions. He was so startled and scared that he fled. He fled to sound like, I'm getting the hell out of here. This doesn't look good for me. I know what they're already going to be assuming. So he fled back to his home in the Greenwood district. I don't blame him, honestly. After the city gets wind of this, the racist newspaper, the Tulsa Tribune, printed an article with the headline, "Nab Negro for attacking girl in an elevator." And of course, they knew what they were doing. They knew that I feel that they knew that this would enrage the racist white citizens of Tulsa. I mean, as it was, the KKK was already on the rise. Tulsa had one of the largest chapters of the KKK. So they just stirred up a hornet's nest with this story. It was very highly sensationalized. Even though this story is so-called giving her account of what happened that day, it's not even confirmed that it's a direct quote from her. What I suspect more than likely happened is the store clerk, he was a racist jerk. He probably saw what happened, like I said, drew his own conclusions, and he went, I believe he's the one that more than likely spoke with the Tulsa Tribune and gave them that salacious story, and, added his little, embellished it, whatever he needed to do. The Tulsa Tribune, they took it and ran with it, and here you have it with this messy headline. And later on, you'll find out that they didn't even, you can't even find this in print now. Oh, there's pictures of it, so we know that the article existed, but they went as far as to even remove it from the books. There's no authentic hard copy of this print of this article. So they even went as far as calling him Diamond Dick in the story just to further criminalize him. Now some do say that he was kind of flashy. Back then you could still drop out of school and make a decent living if you found the right kind of profession or job. And he was a shoe shiner, so not only that, he was a shoe shiner in Tulsa that was a oil-rich city, so he was getting pretty good money from that. I know this looks crazy right now, but it's going somewhere. Dick Rowland, of course, fled back to Greenwood, where he felt like he would be safe. This time, the Tulsa Tribune just really criminalized him, and again, just made the situation look worse than what it actually was. As far as I know to this day, charges were never filed against Dick Rowland. They just basically detained him for his own safety. So, of course, they came, they found where he was, they detained him and brought him back to the courthouse. Just to put this in further context and give some background on Tulsa and that time, a white citizen named Roy Belton was convicted of a murder only the year before. He actually murdered a taxi driver, and the local law enforcement gave him over to the lynch mob for him to be hung. Of course, he was hung. The black citizens of Greenwood knew that if they would hang a white man who was actually convicted of the crime that he did, that they would not hesitate to hang Dick Rowland for an accusation that everyone pretty much knew was false. They knew that they did not trust that the local law enforcement would protect Dick Rowland. You have to remember, this took place post-World War I. So not only did you have a lot of white World War I vets, you had a lot of black World War I vets too. And for the black World War I vets, coming back to a country, basically fighting for a country that you don't even have the freedoms that everyone else has in, they felt some type of way about that. They had seen where at least one lynching happened again, even though it was of a white man. They knew, because by this time there were already lynchings happening in other places. This was already after the Red Summer of, I believe, 1919. They knew something was in the air. Black community leaders, including black veterans, also organized to defend Rowland against the lynch mob emboldened by the KKK, of course, and other races in Tulsa. Tulsa had one of the largest, like I said before, Tulsa had one of the largest KKK chapters in the country, and growing. So it just wasn't a good look. It was not a good situation. But I'm glad to hear that. What makes, one thing I love about this story, as I started researching it, I'm glad to hear that the black citizens of Tulsa actually fought back, because I wasn't aware that they fought back. Because with a lot of these stories that you hear, it sounds like either, I hate to say it, but it sounds like either we were cowardly or we didn't fight back. And and I get there was insurmountable odds, that things weren't in our favor a lot of times. A lot of times we were outgunned and outnumbered. But as I delved deeper in this story, it was just I was so glad to actually see where we actually fought back. We took a position of, okay, we're not letting this happen in this town. We're not gonna let this happen to him. People in the community knew Dick Rowland. He was a shoe shiner. And the general consensus amongst people in the community that, that had their shoes shined or knew him from Greenwood, that he was a nice young man. They knew that he didn't commit sexual assault against Sarah Page. And as far as we know, Sarah Page never actually ever filed charges against him. So at downtown Tulsa at the courthouse, you had an angry mob of racist white Tulsa citizens, and you also had black Tulsa citizens that were not trying to let this happen on their watch. And mind you, like I said, there were even black vets up there that had on their military, uniform. And do you think those racists cared? Do you think they're like, oh, he's a serviceman, he fought for our country, he's a patriot? No, they did not think that at all. As a matter of fact, they even yelled a racial slur at one of the black vets that was armed, that came there to defend Rowland and to make sure that things went smoothly and there was no mess as far as him, as far as the white mob getting a hold of him and lynching him. When the racist white citizens of Tulsa, they yelled a racial slur at him, like, I think they said something along the lines of, hand me that gun, N-word, or N-word, what are you doing with that gun? They tussled with the gun, and then, all hell broke loose, basically, and all this gunfire was exchanged. Following the gunfire exchange between the white angry mob and the black citizens of Greenwood, the black citizens, and I believe this was primarily men that went up there, they realized they were outgunned, they were outmanned. They didn't, they thought that they could probably flee back to Greenwood and have a home field advantage. And I don't even think it was their intent to bring the battle back to their, home turf. But unfortunately, we're going to unpack how that plays out. Meanwhile, the police were deputizing the angry white mob. The white mob was even attempting to break into sporting goods stores and pawn shops for more guns and ammo. After what transpired, a black person was not safe as they began to shoot black people on sight in downtown Tulsa. A white mob headed to Greenwood, where they continued to murder the black citizens of Greenwood. The white mob broke into the home of an elderly black couple, shot them in the back of the head, and looted their home and set it on fire. They continued to murder the black citizens of Greenwood in cold blood, including a well-known black surgeon, Dr. A.C. Jackson. 24 black-owned businesses had burned by 4 a.m. the following morning after the invasion by the angry white mob. This morning, word spread like wildfire through Greenwood and other black neighborhoods that the angry racist white mob of 1500 was heading their way. Some black citizens decided to stay and defend their homes and businesses, while others fled Greenwood. However, when they realized how greatly outnumbered, many decided to get the hell out of Dodge to live to fight another day. The Greenwood men defended the Frisco tracks like a stone wall until they exhausted their ammunition. O.B. Man was a World War I veteran and led a valiant fight by sniping the members of the angry white mob from the tower of the Mount Zion Baptist Church. Unfortunately, the angry white mob, they also fired back until the church was engulfed in flames. Another Greenwood legend, Peg Leg Taylor, this is one of my favorite stories, was said to have shot a dozen white men from a sniper position on Standpipe Hill. Both survived the conflict, luckily. It had been said that they got killed in the conflict, but no, honey, they survived. I was listening to an interview on a podcast that featured Peg Leg Taylor's, I want to say, great-granddaughter. And just this, because apparently they kept the story alive even after he died many years later, of course. But yeah, they kept the story alive, and just hear the passion in her voice, and just to hear her recount that story, it had me on the edge of my seat. There were many black citizens that were casualties, but they also took out a lot of those racist bastards along with them too. While some argue that this did not happen, several survivors from the massacre gave accounts of surplus warplanes from Curtiss Southwest Airplane Company were dropping turpentine bombs on Greenwood. It was the first aerial attack of a U.S. city. Not only did they drop bombs, but they also shot at any black person that they saw on the ground. To make matters worse, when they ran out of ammo, they reloaded, resulting in repeated attacks. Some were rumored to have also carried TNT. The governor of Oklahoma finally got the National Guard involved. The National Guard apprehended the remaining black citizens of Greenwood and placed them in internment camps, supposedly for their own safety. The white mob was so merciless that when the firefighters came out to actually get the situation under control, and they actually shot at the firemen. And this has been documented, even because later on when the survivors of Greenwood tried to file insurance claims, the firemen even stated, hey, we could even put out the fire because we were getting fired upon by this angry white mob. The homes couldn't have been saved. And not only that, most of their insurance had some type of anti-riot clause or some kind of BS. So it was just crazy. You would think that once the National Guard got involved that things would have calmed down. Well, unfortunately they didn't right away. While they were detaining whatever citizens that were left behind from Greenwood, while they were detaining them in internment camps at various locations, the white mob continued to loot and set their homes on fire. Most of the black people in Greenwood had been detained, so it was like open season for them just to go into homes and loot what they wanted and have at it. And then after that, set the homes on fire. Racist Karens were even seen stealing jewelry, clothing, silverware. So it wasn't just the men, it was the women too. It was reported that 2,000 black citizens fled Greenwood. While there are 39 documented deaths, many witnesses stated that there were up to 300 deaths. And personally, I find 300 deaths to be more believable, possibly more, simply for the fact that many witnesses saw that bodies being disposed in various different bodies being discarded, unfortunately, in very different ways. It was rumored that bodies were buried in mass unmarked graves. This has actually been verified recently. That bodies were disposed of in a nearby river, and even rumors that some of the bodies were even incinerated. I mean, this is just, ugh. And what's so disturbing about this is that this isn't the only place where this type of thing happened. I'm sure many of you are aware I'm sure some of you may have seen the movie Rosewood. Same kind of thing happened there too. And it's just, ugh. I remember I think I seen Rosewood when I was in high school, and I don't know what could have been worse. I don't know if this was worse or Rosewood was worse. Actually, with Rosewood, from what I could tell, there weren't as many people that fought back. From what I could tell in Rosewood, and when I speak of Rosewood, I'm referring to the movie. From what I could tell in that movie, there's maybe only three people that fought back in that. And I don't know if that was part of, if they took, what they call it. I don't know if they took, they just embellished that, or if they actually fought or not. And I think it's also interesting to me is that whenever you hear about a lot of the stories, it's kind of portrayed as if people took a non-violent stance, or if they took everything laying down. And I'm happy to hear that didn't always happen. I'm very happy to hear that, because, they fought back. I love that, because you hear so many stories, and like I said, I'd heard about this story before and vaguely heard about it, but I had always assumed that the citizens didn't fight back. I just heard that, they were, basically didn't have any arms. They didn't take up arms like that, and the white citizens just came in and just, took it without much resistance. But no, we fought as if the loss of life wasn't bad enough. There were, all the homes and the businesses that were burnt down, black-owned businesses. At the time that this happened, it was at least $2 million in property damage and loss. And then on top of that, they made it, the city of Tulsa did, I got that on my hair. They did everything that they could to make it very difficult for them the citizens of Greenwood to rebuild. I mean, come on. It's just I guess I know that these things happen, but the lack of humanity, man, that's what kills me. Even though I know these things happen myself. I even have family members that in Tulsa. Now I wasn't able to verify if any of my ancestors or if we were descendants of the if we were descendants of the people of from the Tulsa Race Massacre. But I've been to Tulsa before, and it's just just to know that this stuff happened. It just even now it boils my blood. And even it's just. And what's so sad about it, not much has really changed. I mean, we're talking about 2 million at that time, mind you, 2 million in property damage and losses, which in our generation, that's the equivalent of 28 million in our currency. So, and just there was, and then, it just displays so many of them once that happened. I mean, you're talking about people that went from being very prosperous to now being homeless. Even though the Red Cross stepped in, the city of Tulsa, they so-called trying to help the situation. But I think they were just, they were really just, they were assholes. They were jerks. Whatever help was offered, they never recovered what they lost in full. Never. Now, some of them stayed and rebuilt because they did rebuild Greenwood. You don't hear much about that either unless you do the research. But some of them stayed and, helped rebuild. And in some cases, they were actually forced to rebuild. They had to even clean up the damage, even though they didn't create the damage caused by, by the Tulsa Race Massacre. They had to stay and clean up the damage, the ones that chose to stay. Or, like many of them, many of them, as you can imagine, were so traumatized. They're like, hell, I'm going to get the what out of here and, rebuild somewhere else. But then it's like, as when I was doing the research, it's like, it's kind of like it was one of those things too, because a lot of people are surprised that so many of them stayed. A lot of people stayed because at this time, like, Red Summer had already happened. And things didn't get much better. It's like, you can't really, it's one of those things that you just can't really run from racism. You can't, the KK was very prominent. They were everywhere. They stuck their chest out and were proud, and everything. So, and then not only that, at that time, it was very, very much a known fact that the local law enforcement had KKK ties. A lot of people, a lot of the white, a lot of the more influential people in various towns where a lot of this stuff happened, they had, associations with the KKK. So it's like, where could you go where that wasn't an issue? I mean, and then of course, granted, some people, they went to the north, they went to west, to California, things like that too. But I mean, I've heard stories about stuff that's happening even in those places. There's no escaping racism. No matter where you go. Can't believe I got this on my hair, but that's okay. That's okay. I can fix it. And not only that, and to add further insult to injury, no one was ever formally prosecuted for the murder, the property loss, the damage, the arson, all the crimes that were committed tonight by those racist bastards. No one was ever convicted of it. No one, not a single person was ever convicted of it. Now, I would only hope that the citizens of Greenwood that stuck around, or even the ones that maybe left and came back later, I can only hope that they got their own justice in some form or fashion. Now, you do know, because it just kind of tickled me to read this, is that, if you recall, I said that many of the Karens that were also involved in the looting of Greenwood, they were stealing, women's jewelry, they were stealing clothing, they were stealing silverware. So, well, what happened is, I remember reading this, but what happened was that some of these, some of the women that are citizens of Greenwood, they would be out and about, and they might spot one of those Karens wearing their necklaces or other jewelry, and they would just snatch it right off of them, like, hey, that's mine. And I didn't hear if that, if it escalated after that, but I don't blame him. I don't blame him. If I saw somebody wearing my jewelry, and especially if it's valuable, I'm snatching it all. I'm snatching back what's mine. I'm snatching my own chain off off their ass too. But yeah, it's just. And what's even worse about this? So many people don't even know this happened. I barely knew about it, honestly. I just only found out about the Tulsa Race Massacre probably within the last, I want to say maybe 10 years. Because I didn't, they don't teach you about this in school. They didn't say anything about it when I was in school. I do know that. They didn't teach me about it in school. Whatever I learned about the Tulsa Race Massacre, I've only learned as an adult. And, and sadly, even though I have relatives that are from Tulsa, even visited Tulsa myself, I never heard any of them talk about it either. Now, I will say that in a lot of families, whether they were there before or after, and, all this stuff that happened back then. Now, people talk about stuff more. Now, when stuff happened, people talk about it. But back then, in post the Tulsa Race Massacre, maybe we're talking like maybe 5, 10, maybe 15 years out, people were kind of hush-hush for the most part. No more than the people that were, like the lawyers that got involved. And of course, since there's a Tulsa reparations coalition or commission that's trying to actually get reparations for the survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. But the thing is, a lot of the people in 2021, a lot of these people have, passed on. I was reading where here recently, I think it was May 11th, that there was a survivor of the Tulsa Race Massacre that was 7 at the time, that she's now 107. So she's just celebrated her 107th birthday, thank goodness. But, a lot of the people, if not almost all of them, have passed on at this point. Their descendants will at some point hopefully be able to get those reparations. But hell, all of us as Black people deserve reparations if we were, experience American slavery. But, it's just trying to fight for that has been, it's been tough. I mean, obviously it hasn't happened yet. But, so where I stand on reparations. But, yeah, it was just awful, awful, awful. As I complete this makeup look, you will hear an excerpt from the podcast, Dreams of Black Wall Street, hosted by Nia Clark. In this interview, she is interviewing Kim Johnson, the great-great-granddaughter of Horace Greely Pegleg Taylor.
It was at a book signing back in 2011, the year before Bishop Clark's death, where a woman named Kim Johnson met Bishop Clark. Now, Johnson contacted me after hearing this podcast to tell me she and her family are the descendants of a man named Pegleg Taylor and his daughter, Lena Eloise Taylor Butler. Both Pegleg and his daughter Eloise are survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. His name went down in history after some people said he single-handedly fought off many members of the mob that were trying to destroy Greenwood in a part of the community called Standpipe Hill. After Johnson learned of her family's involvement in the massacre, she set out to try to learn as much as she could about Horace and his daughter Eloise.
Otis Clark, he gave us an account of Horace Taylor. He said that he was a character. He really liked him. He had a lot of respect for him, but he also said that he was one of the young men who were helping to load magazines behind it was either Mount Zion Church or Mount Pleasant. And he said he was one of the young men who was helping Horace and another contingent of veterans load up the magazines in defense of North Tulsa. He told us that he was there.
Alice Campbell and Kim Johnson, you are sisters, and you say you are the descendants of Lena Eloise Taylor Butler, who is the daughter of Horace Greely Taylor, also known back in 1921, before the Tulsa Race Massacre, as Horace Pegleg Taylor. Both Horace and Lena Eloise were survivors of the Tulsa Race Massacre. Alice, you were the one that had a conversation with Lena Eloise Taylor Butler, also known as Big Mama, in your house. And
yes.
What did she tell you?
I talked to my grandma prior.
Yeah, I talked.
She talked to him. She and I just had a lot of different conversations because I was her caregiver and stuff too. So I'm just going to tell you the story that she told me just out of the blue one day. So she just told me that one day she was just going about her business and she got that feeling that something was getting ready to happen. She told me that the problem that they had initially, she said they had issues with them stealing, with them looting, with them vandalizing their property long time before the riot. She said the issues had gone on for years because of jealousy. Now, she said she didn't know exactly what sparked it, but the initial story was that it started at the courthouse. No, it escalated at the courthouse. It started like down the street from the courthouse. She said 6 or so white men had approached one black man on the street because he was alone. And they started to beat him because of something that had began. That's the mob mentality. And what happened was, instead of black people standing around, the owners came out of the shop and they started shooting. Then the mob came. She said that they started.
When you say people came out of the shops, you mean black people came out of their shops in Greenwood?
The owners came out to help defend this guy because it was 6 men or so on him. But she didn't go home. She was watching it go on. She's telling me what she saw. Now, what her dad told her. Because her dad wasn't in the initial fight. He came home to get her out of there. And I'm going to tell you about that too. But she said once they started shooting, she hid behind a building. Like they used to have spaces between the buildings, like a store, and then the house would be a space. They didn't bash them together like they do now. She said she hid between a store and a house. And they were shooting. She said then people started running. You know, the women started running and other men were running because they were trying to find shelter. Because more and more white people started coming from everywhere with weapons. And she said rakes and all kinds of pitchforks. That's what she described, out rakes. And it went nuts. These black people didn't just die. They fought back the best they could. But she said they started on that end of town where the black people started fighting. They set those initial shops on fire at the very beginning.
That is unlike anything I've ever heard. I just want to be clear about that. I had always heard that the massacre started at the courthouse where Dick Rowland was being held. You're saying your great-grandmother, Eloise, told you that she was in Greenwood the day the massacre began and saw a black man get attacked by a white mob. And she saw black store owners come out of their stores to defend that black man and start shooting. Is that correct?
Once they started defending him, they ended up having to shoot. They didn't come out shoot.
Okay, and your great-grandmother hid between the buildings and watched all this happen. And that was well before the incident at the courthouse in Tulsa where the mob had formed to try to seize Dick Rowland.
Right. The courthouse was down the street. She said, and before they set the buildings on fire, they took everything they could carry. She was running ahead of the crowd that was running. Now, once they started shooting, and the white people started shooting back, looting and setting stuff on fire, black people started running. People knew it was time to get up out of Dodge. I'm telling you, she says that the energy in the air alone let them know that they had to leave town, not just go home. I think she says they ran past her house or something. I don't think a lot of them got to go home. You know, but her dad met her past the courthouse.
Some legend or conspiracy theory has it that Horace died on Standpipe Hill defending Greenwood.
He fought his way to her. The legend has it. She didn't see it, but she heard the legend, the rumors, as they migrated. He took some people out in order to get to his daughter. Because not that he saw her ahead of him, but for some reason she said he knew she was ahead of him. And he had to get to her. Now, she didn't tell me what went on at the courthouse because she kept running. Okay, she did say there was a lot of bad things going on at the courthouse. But it wasn't just there. Yeah, it was like that was the epicenter of it. And they had got wind all over the place. So they coming out the woods on the west side of town, on the east side of town. These people don't even know what's going on downtown. It's being attacked. You know, all these innocent people died, not just men, babies. Women, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you cry.
You're not making me She was just, if you could have heard her, she was there. She wasn't an older woman. She wasn't no grown woman.
Yeah, she was 19. Yeah.
You know, she was a young woman watching people that she cooked for, that she cared for. She cared for these people. She was a domestic in the town. She worked, even though her daddy was rich, she still worked. And these people were being killed in front of her. These people were being shot. This old woman got shot on the front porch. And she ran to the woman's house. She said she was trying to get to this woman's house. And they killed her. She said it was like they were shooting past her. And my grandma, she was terrified of any backfiring from cars or anything.
So she was 19 at the time.
19.
After she got past the courthouse, she got past this lady's house. She didn't name no streets or anything like that. But the way she was running, the courthouse, the way she was talking, everything was on her left-hand side. So if we had a map, she was running up the street and everything was on the left-hand side. She said she got just to the end of this woman's house after she was shot and her daddy grabbed her.
Sure, take your time.
My sister was telling me that there was a discrepancy about his amputation. He was amputated because of infection from a gunshot wound. All the people that were displaced in Oklahoma didn't have nowhere to go. All these people, a lot of them starved to death. These people lost everything. They make it sound like, it was just an incident. These people lost their lives because somebody wanted what they have. She said the ones who made it out of town, she said they had to lay out in the woods on their stomachs with their face on the ground. She said they couldn't move. They couldn't breathe. And people was out there hunting them like they were animals. They wanted to kill them all. Do you understand? They didn't want to just solve what happened. They found a reason. They had been waiting on the reason to go in that town and destroy the black people. And once they started, they hunted the people. And then they dropped bombs from the sky. Do you know what that turpentine did to the people that was left? Anyway, her dad, they said once they figured they couldn't find nobody else. They found some of the people. I'm telling you, she said they found some of the people that were out there in the woods laying on their stomach. Lord, help these people. And they just shot them right there on the ground where they laid. I'm talking about kids, women. They didn't care. Old people, people who had breastfed them, they didn't give a damn. They killed them right there on the ground, she said, and nobody, you couldn't scream, you couldn't do nothing. She said when finally her daddy told her to get up and come on, she said she couldn't even move. He had to hurt her. She said he had to hurt her to make her stand up. He had to hurt her. And they walked. They did not ride. They walked. She said they walked and walked. She said her and about 25 people scattered out, walked to a neighboring town. And I didn't know Oklahoma real well. I used to ask her, was that Muskogee? And she told me it's another town not too far from Tulsa, far enough to walk, I guess, next to Tulsa. She said, and it was there that they got help from other black families. And it was there that they decided they would never talk about it again. And I didn't know nothing about this woman or that all this had happened until what? 1997.
Y'all take it easy on me because this is the first makeup video that I have done in forever. I did have a YouTube channel before, long time ago, but I quit. But you know, I would just now that I'm older, and I just wanted to give it another shot just to have some fun, but also, you know, have some substance to it, tell a story that's not widely known, and give some details and everything else. And I would encourage you to, the people that I discussed in tonight's story, to learn more about them, like Peg Leg Taylor. You heard me playing some of his great-granddaughter's interview during the last part of this video, and I love it. I love I love that story. I love that story. Alicia Scott, I didn't go into detail about him in the story, but Alicia Scott, he was an attorney that helped the years after the Tulsa Race Massacre. It's just been an ongoing legal battle for the past 100 years. Actually, I think there's going to be a centennial celebration in Tulsa this year. They've also just recently celebrated a birthday, one of the survivors. But yeah, it's the story that really touched my heart, especially for one reason, it happened very close to my birthday, actually. Yeah, but it's one of the stories in Black history that have always touched my heart personally on so many levels. I hope to bring more stories in the future that do that. And by all means, y'all, you know, just continue to support me. Please subscribe to me, like the video, the notifications, and select all also on the notifications so that you get them as they come out. I look forward to sharing more stories with you all. And I hope that you all gather to this not just about putting on makeup. For me, it's not. And which is great. I love makeup, don't get me wrong. But it's about also putting out great stories. And just hoping that, you know, these stories reach more and more of us, because there's so many stories that we just don't know because it wasn't taught to us in school. It might have been glossed over or whatever. And I just want to be an instrument in bringing more of those stories to light and sharing those with you all. That's all I really have to say. Peace. And I will see you all next time on The Beats of History.